Here's an amazing quote I got from my podcast guest. If you want to be in less demand, pretend that change is not happening. Colin Levy is a legal technology maven. He has been writing about all things legal tech for a good part of 17 years. He has seen so much change happen. And on this episode, he and I got to talk about all of the change and maybe OD a little bit on pessimistic pragmatism of the changes that are coming to the legal industry. I always look at it as foretold is forward. So I share my thoughts and Colin shares his thoughts about what's going to happen to the legal industry in the 3 to 5 year time frame. I think the future is bright for those who listen and actually take action based on what they learn. Not just listen and be like, this is not looking good for us. No, listen, learn what you can do, and Colin shares some really solid advice what can be done and should be done to fortify your positions, and then actually do it. Enjoy the episode, and forgive me for being so incredibly pragmatically pessimistic this time. Hi there. I have a small but really meaningful favor to ask you. I watch at the stats on our YouTube channel and Spotify channel, wherever most people listen and watch our podcast. And I see that over 80% of everybody who listens to it regularly is not a subscriber. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel. And the reason for that is my mission and the mission of my team is to help as many small law firm owners to learn how to transform their law firms into better businesses, and so they in turn enjoy better lives. When you hit subscribe button, you tell these platforms that this is content worth listening, worth viewing, and they in turn will show it to many other small law firm owners and hopefully help me fulfill our mission of helping them create a better business and enjoy better lives. So would you please do me this favor? It would mean the world to me, and hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard at creating good content with practical ideas that help you and your teams grow better law firms. Thank you. Welcome to Grow Law Podcast. I have a great guest with me here today, Colin Levy, legal technology maven. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You've been, as I refer to, a journalist in the space, although you do not write for any specific publication as far as I know, but you've been self-publishing articles in the field of legal technology for about 17 years. You have a book out, actually multiple books out. One of them I can see in your background, Legal Tech Ecosystem. And from what I know about you, you're just a person who is fascinated with marrying technology and the legal profession and improving the legal profession through use of technology. So happy to have you on the show, especially at a time where the rate of change due to technology has changed so dramatically in just the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of remarkable how fast technology has changed. For me, it's exciting, but I think there are plenty of those who feel a little sense of overwhelm or intimidation by the pace at which things have changed and the pace at which I think these impacts are starting to become being felt in the legal industry.
Yeah, and when I think about this rate of change, and I put myself in a cohort of people about my age, let's peg them between 45 and 55. I'm 47 as of the time of this recording. The change can be very scary. I think human beings by nature we default toward consistency. We like consistency and predictability. And this past few years have been anything but, starting with COVID, which brought about major change, to ChatGPT that really came out as a mainstream thing in 2023, just on the tail end of COVID, right after COVID, to explosion of AI tools for lawyers. There's so much change. Yet what we want is stability and predictability. How do you see people, and I know you talk to a lot and you visit a lot of podcasts, how do you see people dealing with this rate of change?
So I think to deal with it requires kind of having a certain mindset. And I think that mindset is really one of kind of being comfortable being uncomfortable. There's a certain degree of which you have to kind of acknowledge the fact that because things are changing so quickly, there will likely be times when you'll be uncomfortable and you don't necessarily have to kind of fully embrace it per se, although I would recommend that. but you have to at least accept that that is going to be part of what is going to happen, because humans, generally speaking, are not great with change. And I think that actually has to do with sort of our ancestral heritage, and that our ancestors were hunters and gatherers, and once they found a way to, hunt or gather whatever they needed, they stuck with it, because why would they change if something's working? I think that has translated now into, once we find a way of working, even if it's not ideal by some person's standards or optimal by someone's person's standards, it works for us. Because it works for us, and because we are comfortable with it, we don't want to have to change it. And that's where the conflict and tension arises, is when technology asks that question of, well, yes, you're doing something and it works, but there are better ways of doing it, and you should probably start exploring those other ways. And then, mentally you're thinking to yourself, well, why should I if I'm comfortable doing it the way I'm doing it and it seems to work for me?
I have a friend. He is well into his 60s now. He's been a PI attorney for all of his adult life. And to the day, he still has paper files. He has a legal assistant who does a lot of data entry on his behalf, because although he has a computer on his desk, he uses it to send emails primarily. That is his zone of comfort. He does not want to change. He sees himself retiring from doing what he does at some point. And he's like, I'm not going to change. This is fine. I get client work, I get cases. It's no problem. So he doesn't want to change. For most others who are not near retirement age, this rate of change is absolutely overwhelming. And I think sometimes when you talk to people, they're like, yeah, I got Clio. I probably use 10% of it. Yes, I have this tool and I tried that, but it's confusing, it's overwhelming. I'd rather somebody else in the firm do it. The sea of change creates a sea of anxiety. And I think a lot of people are just not well prepared to deal with it. But I'm with you. If you do not embrace this change, chances are you might be swiped off your feet by this huge tidal wave that is already here. It's not coming, it's here.
Right. It is here. And I think that, if you are trying to remain successful and remain relevant to some degree, you have to adapt. And I think that's just the way evolution happens, is you adapt. Humans have adapted various things to not just meet the needs of the world, but also to survive in the world. A lot of other animals do the same thing. They adapt or develop adaptations to survive. And same with humans. I think the challenge is really just the pace at which adaptation needs to happen, particularly in the legal field, is challenging, in part because the legal industry has for a long time operated as if the world were a static place, as if things never changed and things were always the same way day in, day out. And for a long time they were that way. They were always that way. But over the last 10 years plus, we've seen a lot of change occur. And I think because it's happened sort of in some ways haphazardly up until the point in which generative AI arrived, you could get away with not having to adapt as much as you probably should have. But now with generative AI being here, and we're 3 years in terms of this generative AI journey, I think that there's an increased need to embrace broader scale adaptation, particularly as clients start becoming more cognizant of the technology's existence, then start asking the lawyers that they've hired to help them, hey, are you using this tool? Are you using that tool? And if you're not, they may start looking elsewhere to work with some other attorney because they think that they're more tech savvy and can help them better. And perhaps more importantly, perhaps provide services at lower cost because of the fact that they're using technology differently or using other tools.
That's probably one of the greatest threats that are facing the entire industry, is that the margins are going to be compressed and the price of that lawyers can charge their clients will be slashed. And here's why. So I am currently working with 2 attorneys. One is my business attorney who I've been working he's also a client of my firm for 4, 5, 6 years, I don't recall. And because we have a sizable business and we do various things, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of back and forth. Very normal stuff. And I'm also working with an estate planning attorney. Unlike 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would come to an attorney with a blank slate, a list of questions maybe. Today I feel like I've done 70% of their work. Fees haven't changed, but I bet if I start shopping around, there will be attorneys who are like, hey, Sasha, you've done all of this? This will not be $5,000 now, it will be $2,500. And I think that's coming. I'm not yet comfortable using AI completely instead of an attorney. I don't think that's going to happen when it comes to things that are complex. But the example that I used, estate planning attorney, I don't see why not. It's a very prescriptive field. They ask, I answer, they ask, I answer, they ask, I answer, and then they provide me with a document.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is dependent also, to the extent to which AI can do something depends upon, among other things, how sort of prescriptive it is, to your point, in terms of, how straightforward things are, how complex or not complex things are. And also, I would say, importantly, the degree to which human judgment is needed, because the law is not always straightforward in all areas. And AI is becoming better at dealing with some of that complexity, but it's still not great at it. And on top of that, sometimes there are just things that a human just instinctively understands or can incorporate into whatever work product is being created that AI just cannot become aware of or just can't handle. So I do think there is that sort of balancing factor. And in addition, I just think there's always going to be a need for some degree of human judgment. We're working with AI or using AI to help you. Just because AI remains so data-driven and doesn't think and doesn't operate in a way that a human brain operates or a human being kind of thinks about the world and interprets things. So it's going to be an interesting journey, considering we're really at the very start of this journey even now.
Yeah, it's remarkable to think that ChatGPT, OpenAI, the company that built ChatGPT, is about 6 years old. So their product is really a child. It's in childhood stage, but it's already incredibly advanced. And 3-5 years from now, it could think, I believe that we'll start thinking like a human and think about different facets and ask the right questions. So whenever I think about the anxiety that some of the law firm owners share with me, I agree with them. I think that they need to become better business operators in order to fend off the tidal wave that's coming their way, that's going to probably destroy a few businesses along the way because they, A, did not adapt to this new technology, which would in turn make them more efficient, but because they didn't, they're not as efficient as their competitors. And B, if they're not good business operators, I think that there is a contraction coming to the industry as a whole, because more sophisticated users are going to be able to go 90% of the way with AI, 95% of the AI with the AI, and then just come to their lawyer for review. Like, for example, our business attorney currently is working on a complex M&A transaction for my partner and I. And I asked him, can you work on this? And he said, I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to have one of my associates do it. And like, are you going to review it before it goes back to us and the seller? He said, yes. So I'm thinking of that associate, and I'm like, one day that associate is not going to be associate, it's going to be AI. And Andrew, the main guy who's been doing this for 2.5 decades, he's going to be reviewing the work not of an associate, but of AI.
Right. And I think that raises actually an interesting question that is kind of just starting to be explored, which is, what is the role of a junior attorney these days and going forward? What should they be doing? What should they be? How should they be treated? What type of work should they be doing? Because traditionally they were doing a lot of things that AI can do reasonably well at this point, and likely AI will become better at. So that will mean that these junior attorneys will likely have to do more sophisticated things, but the question will be, will they be prepared to do that? what kind of training will they need, which then raises the question of, well, how are we educating our lawyers to become lawyers? And I have long thought that the legal education system has been pretty far behind the curve when it comes to educating lawyers. And I think only now, a little more than a handful of law schools are finally coming around to this idea of, well, gee, we need to start, actually giving law students some practical skills training and exposure to technology and various tools that are tech-based to help them do their work when they become lawyers and start practicing.
Yeah, that's a good insight. I haven't thought about the educational component of it, but yes, I think that there will be, in the next decade or so, there will be fewer junior attorneys than there have been in the previous decade, because demand is going to probably somewhat diminish, somewhat. By the way, if you're listening to this and you think that Sasha is doom and gloom, I don't think about that just for attorneys, not just for this field. Like, I have a very close family friend who is a radiologist. He's a doctor. He's concerned about his job. He looks at x-rays, MRI readings. And today he does it by looking at the screen. Tomorrow there will be AI. It's actually already today. It's looking at the same screen and it's evaluating what it's seeing and it's telling him what it's seeing, and he simply confirms often enough. He simply confirms that the AI thing is correct. Guess what? There will be fewer radiologists in the future.
Well, I would say that may be the case, but I also think, though, because of the nature of the health industry and because a lot of decisions can often be life or death, literally, I think there will always be a need for some degree of human review because, AI it's going to get a lot of things right, but even just getting 0.5% of things wrong is too high to risk. So there will be a need for there to be, again, some degree of human oversight, because humans, when you're doing surgery or when you're looking at an x-ray or what have you, the whole story may not be present in whatever amount of data that you're giving to an AI. There may be other factors that are at play or unexpected things that may happen. Because look, if someone's performing surgery on someone, you typically have a plan and you know what you're doing, but sometimes something may not go right. And you need to be able to know what to do when that happens. And you won't be able to predict when or why that would happen. So, that means that, human experience and human eye and human intervention is needed.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, and it remains to be seen how it's going to play out. But many years ago, I dated an oncologist, and she told me that one day, nobody talked about AI then. She told me one day, there will be a computer who is going to be able to do my job better than I do. And I'm like, explain what that means. And she's like, my job is very prescriptive. A patient comes to me, and they ask them about what it is that they're feeling. And they tell me about their symptoms, and I prescribe a test. And then they get tested, and then I look at test results. They either got it or they don't. If they do, I look at the test result further and I understand what type of tumor they have. And based on the type of tumor they have, I prescribe prescription A, treatment A, or treatment B, or nothing. And they decide what it is that they want. She's like, there will be a computer who will never need to sleep. I do. She's like, those 24-hour shifts that she did like 3 days a week, and sometimes weekends and consecutive days. She's like, I make mistakes. And she's like, that computer, I will be happy when that computer is able to replace me. So I think AI, with human oversight, is going to cause a lot of contraction. And again, I'm not trying to cause more anxiety. I'm more like forewarned. Foretold is forewarned. I'm always thinking about, like, as you're listening to this today, Mr. or Mrs. law firm owner, you got to ponder upon the thought of, like, how do I defend my positions, or how do I improve my positions in my business with all of this changes? So I always think about, like, you own your own law firm, become a better business operator. There will always be a substantial market who will not want to use AI for their legal needs. They will go to a real human and get it done. You just have to become a very efficient operator of your business.
Right, because I think the other part of it too is that, and this was something I think that was kind of learned by some even the hard way during sort of lockdowns of COVID that humans want connection with other humans. They need that sort of instinctive, sort of innate feeling of being able to connect with another human in person or what have you. And technology can't replicate that. So to some degree, yeah, certainly, lawyers, law firm owners need to become better business people and business operators, which is probably the likely subject of a whole another episode, because I think lawyers traditionally have not been great business people to some degree. But they also need to be really good at building and maintaining relationships with others, because that is one thing that I think will remain true for the foreseeable future, is this need to be able to connect with others and feel like there's someone out there that is listening to them, understands them, and is able to connect with them on an actual human level, even if technology is doing 95 or 99% of the work per se, but there's a human there that they can connect with and that they can be listened to or be supportive to them or what have you.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said. And I think what's going to probably happen is that one human who is efficient with AI use is going to replace what 5 humans do today. And they will be able to maintain those human connections with their human clients.
Right. Because I think the other challenge, as well, and this is something you brought up, is this idea of the fact that you're going to need less people to do the same work or the same type of job. And that is definitely going to raise some conflict and some tension, because for a long time there's been a lot of people doing the same type of job the same way every day, and that is no longer the reality, which will mean that you will either need to learn a new job or learn different tasks that you previously didn't think you needed to do, but now you do need to do, because there are those tasks that are just for some degree of complexity or what have you, can't be done by AI or some other form of technology.
I think an interesting parallel can be drawn between 100 years ago. More people worked in the fields, in the farms, than actually lived in the cities in the United States. Why? Well, pre-plow, a human gatherer had to go there and gather whatever it is that grew. Then there was a plow, a human plow, and then there was a horse-driven plow. But then there was a tractor, which was very efficient. You still need a human to drive that tractor. For now, I think that those humans are also probably going to be replaced in that job, and there will be just computerized tractors that are driving and plowing the fields. But it's happened to a lot of industries, and it's just happening now. And again, it's just like, how do you fortify your existing position and make it stronger?
Yeah, I mean, you go about, you make your position stronger by adding to your skill set, by learning new things, by being willing to take on other types of work, and frankly becoming, finding ways to distinguish yourself from other people and in other ways, and that can be done in any number of different ways. But I think the bottom line is, yes, because of technology now in some ways taking over parts of jobs and things, you do need to become a more astute learner and a more pragmatic learner. And what I mean by that is someone being open and willing to learn things that will be complementary to AI and technology, and won't try to compete with it to some degree.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we hit the record button, I admitted to you that I am now being 47. Sometimes I don't want to learn something new. Whereas 10 years ago, I would be eager to learn something new, whether it's a piece of digital technology, less so than a physical technology. Like I pick up a new gadget and I'm like, I don't want to learn how to set it up. I'll kick it off to my 18-year-old or my 15-year-old son, and I'll be like, set this up. And they'll go and they'll figure it out quite quickly. And I recently recognized that I'm changing. As I'm getting older, I am changing. I want to stay more comfortable with what I know and focus on what I know. Although I am somewhat of a power user of ChatGPT, for example, but with many other things like, And once I realized, I was like, wait a second, this is actually a competitive disadvantage. There is an equivalent of Sasha who is managing a different marketing firm, just like mine. He's 35 and he's eager to learn everything that comes his way. And he's going to outcompete me. That led me to internal conversation like, how dare I to become complacent and say like, I want somebody else learning this stuff. It's on me. It's on me to defend and fortify and improve my positions in my business.
Right.
So, but for those of you who may be listening who are similar age to me or maybe a little bit older and you think like, I don't want to deal with this shit, guess what? If you don't, it will come and bite you in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, the fastest way to become less in demand and less needed is to either pretend the world isn't changing or to not try to adapt and learn. Because what that is basically going to mean is that you are, stuck. And that may work for a little while for those that, you've worked with for a long time perhaps and are kind of like, yeah, he's a little stuck, but you know what, I've been working for X number of years. It's okay for now. But there'll be a point at which you just won't be relevant anymore. And I think that speaks to, some lawyers who are close to, retiring or thinking about retiring. The question for those folks, I think, is one both of, financially, whether it makes sense, obviously, to retire or not, but also, okay, if I want to continue working, even though I've been doing this for, decades upon decades, but I'm not ready to retire. I don't want to retire. I want to continue working. Your option is either to learn and challenge yourself or to accept the fact that at some point you likely will be retired, even if you haven't formally retired yet. And it's up to you which way you want to go. And I think which speaks to, I think, this need for all of us to be willing to challenge ourselves sometimes, even if it makes us feel like we're uncomfortable or uncertain. We're all uncertain. We're all uncomfortable. We're all learning as we're going here. The world is incredibly dynamic and challenging, and we have to accept that reality because it's the only reality we have in front of us.
I love that quote that you said earlier, which was, if you want to become less in demand, the easiest way to do it is to pretend that the world is not changing.
Right.
Spot on. And I think that if you are an owner, operator of your own law firm, yesterday was the best time to learn more about how to get more business, marketing. Yesterday was the best time to learn more about automations in the field of intake, your sales system. Yesterday was the time to learn additional features in Clio that would help you do your cases faster at a lower cost. Yesterday was the best day to learn more about how to attract best employees and retain them. But the second best is today.
Right. I think, you're never going to be able to keep up with the rate at which technology is advancing. So I think that's not the right approach. What you need to do, though, is always have it in front of you and understand where it is relative to you, so that you always have it in sight and you're always aware of where it is compared to you. And if that's not the case, then you need to catch up, I think. Because again, if it's not about trying to compete with AI or compete with technology, it's more a matter of just trying to keep pace with it. In other words, you are here and technology is here. Always make sure that distance remains the same.
Yeah, there's an old joke that you just reminded me of. Two guys are sitting in the woods and they hear a bear roar. One guy goes like, hey, how are we going to outrun the bear if it comes after us? And the other guy's like, we don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you. The truth of the matter is you don't need to outrun or keep up with the rate of change in technology. You just need to outrun your competition, or at least stay there with the best of them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it depends on what type of bear. You may not necessarily want to be running or not, but in any event, I think that, you definitely want to, what will set yourself apart from others is your degree to which you are fluent and aware of the reality you exist in relative to other people.
This has probably been the most pessimistically pragmatic podcast episode I've ever done, and I've been running this show for 3.5 years. But everything that we said is absolutely true.
Well, I think that it's just, a lot of what I have shared is just from observations have made from conversations I've had with others, because I've long held the view that the best way to learn is to listen and learn from others. And that's what I did initially when I was learning about legal tech, was just having conversations with others who are more experienced in the space and just letting them share their stories, their lessons, their journeys.
Let's play a pretend game for a second. Let's imagine that you and I decide to partner up and acquire a law firm. It's a B2C law firm. Let's say it's either estate planning or criminal defense or personal injury. It doesn't matter. You're in the head of technology. You're the CTO for our law firm. I'm going to focus on growing business, bringing in business. You're focused on efficient operations. We want our profit margins to be at 60%. We want 40% to go. For those of you who may not understand what that means, it means that all of your cost of doing business, of delivering the service rather, is 40%. So for every $1,000 that you bring in as revenue, you spend up to $400 on delivering the service. What technologies are you implementing out of the gate to make sure that we can perform efficiently?
I think the most important one is software to help kind of handle the back-end operations of the law firm. So something that can handle billing, intake, matter management, workflow management, those types of things, because you don't want those things to become bottleneck, because you're going to have a lot of other things to worry about. So you want a tool that can handle that. Like Clio, for example, is one that a lot of small to medium firms use. And that now can handle legal research as well due to the recent acquisition of Velux. So I think that there is a definite need for a tool that can handle all the back end work, because the last thing any lawyer wants to be doing is spending time on that stuff. And on top of that, you want to make intake as effective and productive and efficient as possible, because you don't want a client feeling like they're having to do a lot of work just to have them help you out. And so that is also something that a software package can really help with, because it can help get all the information that you need so that your file is all set up for this client, and you can just move forward and not have to worry about any of that. And it can be constantly updated with new information or what have you. I've worked with some firms that have sort of very simple client portals, that are secure. You upload information to that portal, your file gets updated, the lawyer is aware of it, and it just handles all of that. So that really what the lawyer and client can focus on is the strategic stuff that really they're turning to you to help them with, as opposed to all this other administrative stuff that no one really wants to have to deal with, but also frankly can cost you time and money.
Yeah. Here's the pushback that you're likely to get, because we're buying an existing law firm. Chances are they already have Clio. And this is what I had Josh Lennon from Clio. He's one of the executives there, and he is like, at best, with most law firm clients, we get 20% utilization of our software. So most people will spend whatever it is that they're spending on the software and actually use only 20% of it. So what are you doing as the CTO to make sure that our operations are efficient, to make sure that are people actually using it?
Well, a couple things. One, you want to make sure that the software can be integrated in terms of, with the acquiring company, that integration is there. But also you want to understand how your users actually work. Like, why are they using certain tools? Why are they not using other tools? What makes them more likely to use a certain tool? Because a large part of adoption of technology has to do with an understanding of the tool itself, the interface, whether it's usable, whether it's friendly to a user, whether it makes them feel like they're in control and they're being productive, and not something that's a pain in the ass to use, or has a bad user interface, or is tough to handle, or what have you, or is perhaps difficult to perhaps it works on one type of computer or one type of setup and not another. So there are all sorts of different cultural factors at play, I think, that have a big impact on whether a tool has a high adoption rate in a law firm or a low adoption rate.
Makes sense. I also think that the critical component that's often missing is that a law firm buys a software, and then has its own people figure out how to use it. There's
Right.
in most cases, there's no formal training.
Right. So yeah, the problem there is that the users weren't part of the evaluation process, number one, and number two, there wasn't sort of a strategic and systematic rollout of the tool. They just bought a tool and then just said, "All right, we're using this tool now." That's never gonna work, because people have ways of working, and they're gonna be like, "Well, just because you said we have to use this tool, maybe I use it, maybe I won't, but I'm only gonna use it because." To agree, which I had no choice, and I have to use it because we don't have anything else currently, because we got rid of whatever I was using before that I liked.
Yeah, so user buy-in is really important, which I think in most small businesses, that includes law firms, when the owner decides to get a software, there's very little consultation with the end user, because they think of themselves as the end user, and if it suits them, they'll like, we'll use it, but what about everybody else?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. And then the rollout, as you said, product rollout, meaning implementation in your law firm. How are people getting trained on the thing? How are they getting trained to transition from what they're used to and what they're very comfortable with into this new thing? That's usually from what I hear, from what I've seen, including my own business. It's either completely lacking or it's done like, here, watch these videos on YouTube, learn how to use it, and then go for it. And we assume that it gets adapted.
And who's leading the charge? Who's kind of leading the training? There needs to be someone who's kind of managing that. And there needs to be, I'm a big proponent of, there being a human element. There needs to be a human who you can talk to, run issues by, who you can kind of, ask questions about or what have you. Because not everyone's going to learn the same way. Not everyone's going to learn something by watching a video or by listening to something. Or by reading something. Some people will learn well by reading something. Some people will learn better by watching a video. Some people learn better by listening to something. People learn in different ways, and there needs to be an accommodation for all those different ways in which people learn.
Sure. And here's an interesting point. I like to put everything into numbers, like all of these concepts into numbers. So when you, Mr. and Mrs. Law Firm owner, listen or watch this, and you're thinking, like, who's got the time to do this? Well, let's put a dollar sign next to this time. So let's imagine that your average staff cost you $75,000 a year. Plus benefits, plus sick pay, plus this, that, it's $100,000 a year. Let's imagine that if you implemented Creo or any other practice management software correctly, and you train your people correctly, that thing can probably save you 1,600 work hours per year if you have like just a few attorneys, easily. 1,600 hours is approximately what a typical employee actually works. Yes, you pay them for 2,000, but the reality is that's about 1,600 hours. So it's $100,000 that you can get in return for implementing it right and making sure that people get trained. Multiply it by 10 years, there's a cool $1 million payoff at the end of that period if you only implement it the right way. Or the alternative is also true. You implement it haphazardly and then people do not get trained and they're actually frustrated using the thing and they only use it to like 5, 10, 15, maybe 20% of its capability, which is travesty that exists across so many different businesses. So really great insights. Really appreciate you coming on this show. This was wonderful. If someone wants to look you up, I know you have the book, The Legal Tech Ecosystem. It's the blue book in the background. Check it out. Any other way to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. On LinkedIn for sure, Colin S. Levy. Easy to find me on there. You can go to my website, colinslevy.com. That's another way to get in touch with me. So those are probably the two best ways to get in touch with me. And you can also find me on Instagram if you like cats, because I tend to post a lot of cats on Instagram because I have cats that I both love and also drive me crazy. You can find me on there under C. Levy Law. That's CLEVY_LAW.
Got it. Thanks so much, Colin. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.